Hello, welcome to Tales Under the Cat Tree. My name is Dileepa Vijayawardena, better known as Doops. In this podcast, we will explore the wonderful worlds created by the power of words, from life and technology to fiction and the future, through articles, stories, interviews, and more. If you like this episode, please take the time to subscribe to this podcast, as I would like to get to know you better. You can visit me at tales.doops.ca for more. Welcome to part 2 of my wide-ranging conversation with my dear friend Kaj Arnö in Nagu, Finland, in the Finnish Archipelago. For those that don't know Kaj was one of the Finnish contingent of leaders at MySQL AB that shepherded the open-source database to becoming the world's most popular before being sold to Sun Microsystems in 2008. He is one of the founders of MariaDB, former CEO and now executive chairman of the MariaDB Foundation, and more besides. To know more about all these things, please listen to last week's episode. Kaj and I became friends because of our love of the outdoors. Kaj spends much of the summer when he can in Nagu and on the islands there by boat and kayak. I have written about the joy of spending Midsummer in these islands, and even a kayaking trip to one of the more famous islands called Jurmo. This area is primarily inhabited by the Swedish-speaking minority of Finland, and therefore the subject of this episode. Please note, as with the previous episode, we recorded this live in Nagu while walking and playing with Kai's young son. As such, you will hear wind noise and sounds of frisbees and football. Today, however, let's start with a poem. First in Swedish, read by Kaj, then in English by Finland's national poet, Johan Ludvig Runeberg. This poem talks about the birds that fly north to summer in the Finnish archipelago.
Flyttfåglarna, a poem by Finland's national poet Johan Ludvig Runeberg, written in 1870. I flyktande gäster på främmande strand, när söken I åter ert fädernes land? När sippan sig döljer I fädernedalen och bäcken besköljer den grönskande alen, då lyfter de vingen, då kommer de små, väg visar dem ingen I villande blå, det hitta ändå. Det finns så säkert en saknade nord, där våren den väntar med hydda och bord. Där källornas spenar de trötte förfriska, och vaggande grenar om njutningar viska. Där hjärtat får drömma vid nattsolens gång, och kärleken glömma vid lekar och sång, att vägen var lång. De lyckliga glada de bygga I ro, bland mossiga tallar sitt fredliga bo, och stormarna, krigen, bekymren och sorgen, de känna ej stigen till värnlösa borgen, där glädjen behöver blott majdagens brand och natten som söver med rosende band de späda ibland. Du flyktande ande på främmande strand, när söker du åter ditt fädernes land? När palmerna mogna I fädernevärlden, då börjar du trogna den fröjdfulla färden, då lyfter du vingen som fåglarna små. Väg visar dig ingen I villande blå, du hittar ändå.
Birds of Passage by Johan Ludvig Runeberg. Ye fleet little guests of a foreign domain, when seek ye the land of your fathers again? When hid in your valley the windflowers waken, and water flows freely the alders to quicken, then soaring and tossing they wing their way through, none shows them the crossing through measureless blue, yet find it they do. Unerring they find it, the northland renewed, where springtime awaits them with shelter and food, where freshet melt quenches the thirst of their flying, and pines rocking branches of pleasures are sighing, where dreaming is fitting while night is like day, and love means forgetting at song and at play, that long was the way. In peace do the happy things build where they please, their nests of repose in the moss-covered trees, and tempest complaining, dissension and malice, find no way of gaining the unguarded palace, where dawn's flaming embers and nightfall that sends the young to their slumbers with rosy-hued hands are all joy demands. Thou small, fleeting soul in a foreign domain, when seekest thou the land of thy fathers again? When palm trees within it are come to fruition, then faithful begin it, the joyous migration. Wing up and soar onward as little birds do. None points the way sunward through measureless blue, yet thou'll find it too. Now, Kaj, you are involved in something called Project Frederika.
Yes.
First of all, what is Project Frederika?
Project Frederika is a project about making Swedish Finland better represented on open data, meaning Wikipedia and Wikidata. It's also part of the general thing of making objective fact more used by humanity. So we know that there's this bias of LLMs. It is sexist and it is racist and it is bad in several ways because it's trained on data which is sexist and racist. This is a way to change it. The way you change it is by ensuring that the data on which the LLMs, the large language models, are trained, everybody has the technical possibility of doing it by making sure that the data on which centrally LLMs are trained, namely Wikipedia, has correct information. And that is the goal of Project Frederika. Yes, we start from the very luxurious, quote-unquote, problem of Swedish Finland, but the general case is a much more important one, and that is to ensure that the base data out there is correct and unbiased.
That is really important because in one episode I talked about the case of the disappearing internet, but also how bias is entering so much of things like Wikipedia, and therefore we're actually changing our own past. How do you ensure the accuracy or quote-unquote correctness of the information that's there? Aren't you just as biased as everybody else?
I think that's a valid question and a valid comment, and one of my answers is, well, that's a mechanism that I don't need to influence, I don't need to provide. It is a mechanism that is provided by the design of Wikipedia, because Wikipedia has a peer review mechanism where others are checking the validity of data, and that's not a broken model, that's a functioning model. What is broken, though, is that the amount of interest going into areas is not representative of the overall interest of mankind. So like computer games happen to be things that interest young males, and these young males are writing a lot of stuff about them on Wikipedia, which means that data there is overrepresented. That is an issue which I noted for Swedish Finland, because here in Nagu I inherited 5 paintings from 2 famous artists, or semi-famous artists, Jon Oskar Eesti and Marius av Schulten, and I didn't know about them. So I thought, well, I need to check Wikipedia. And they had articles in Finnish, although they were Swedish-speaking. And I thought, that must not remain the case. Somebody ought to do something. And at the same time, I realized that if that somebody is to ever appear, I think I have a special responsibility in taking the role of being that somebody, because I both share an interest in openness and in Swedish Finland, and as formerly MySQL, now MariaDB, I've been in close contact with the infrastructure people at Wikimedia Foundation, because Wikipedia was running MySQL and is now since many years running MariaDB. So I had the opportunity of, like the technical opportunity of doing it, and the, shall we say, humanity's interest in making this happen.
This is very good. This archipelago that we're sitting in is how many islands?
So we're now in Nagu. Nagu has about 1,400, 1,500 inhabitants and way more than 3,000 islands. And if you look at Wikipedia, I think it was 1,212 articles on different islands in the Nagu archipelago.
Now, as I understand it, the Swedish-Finnish archipelago in this area and all the way up to Vasa has had an outsized influence in the world, because I believe seafarers from here went all around the world?
Yes, so there's an extraordinary influence in a way of this area, just because of the geography. So if you look at Jared Diamond and his book about guns, germs and steel, he says that geography has an influence. People are the same, as smart or as diligent and as good and as bad everywhere, but the geography influences things. And this would very much be the case in the archipelago here. We who live here have been the interface between the outside world and Finland since time immemorial. You have to pass here, like the archipelago was the road between the outside world and Finland. And that means that we got to be, shall we say, experts on logistics, on travel by sea. So for instance, if you take the Russian conquest of Alaska, Russians themselves were not seafarers, and Russians themselves didn't have officers for the sea to the extent that the Germans in the Baltics and to the extent that the Swedes in Finland had. So, and that's just because of geography. The knowledge that we have here about how to build boats and how to sail was the one that made the traffic from St. Petersburg to Alaska. And it turns out that two of the governors up until the 1866 or whenever it was, came from this group of people speaking Swedish in Finland. I mean, I've been to Alaska and I went to what's now called Sitka. It was called Novo-Arkhangelsk by the Russians. And you have buildings there where that the Americans say, oh, don't you see this Russian architecture? Well, no. It is Nagu architecture, or specifically it's Åland architecture. The houses look like what the seamen built at home on Åland, and they built the same type of houses when they came to Sitka.
Now, for a lot of listeners, they won't know the difference between Swedish-speaking Finland and Sweden. And Swedish-speaking Finland is very much Finland, and you do not see yourselves as Swedish of Sweden.
Correct.
Why is that?
Yeah, so Sweden and Finland was one country up until we were attacked by Russia in 1808, 1809. There was a war of conquest in that period of time where Russia was growing with military power, and they wanted to have better access to the Baltic Sea. And the way that happened was that they conquered the eastern part of Sweden, which is equal to Finland. And Finland at that point in time, about 1 person in 5 spoke Swedish and about 4 persons in 5 spoke Finnish. And it's not like some listeners might know about the Baltics, where the ruling class was German and the peasants were either Estonians or Latvians. This is not the case with Finland. Oh yes, sure, the ruling class was Swedish, but the general population along the coast was also, all classes of society was Swedish. So that was the case in 1809, and everything continued in Swedish in Finland from a management perspective, administration perspective, up until 1860 something when Finnish as a language started to grow. And ever since, Swedish has been an integral part of Finland. So yes, we have some ancestry hundreds of years ago in Sweden. Our ancestors immigrated to Finland like 1200 such and such. So there is a relationship to Sweden. But if you have been living in a different place for 800 years, you are not associated with that mother country. Like look at Americans, are they associated with the UK? And that's a question of the last 200-300 years. One thing that you should know about Finlandssvenskar is that our association in sports is always with Finland. We will always cheer for Finland, and there's nobody in, even amongst those who don't know any Finnish because they're too young or too old, there's no chance that they would cheer for Sweden against Finland.
Now, that's a good segue into the fact that actually this year's Eurovision was actually a Finnish group singing in Swedish. But the interesting thing about the Swedish was that many Swedes did not understand the Swedish.
They did not, and it's like looking at Americans, do Americans understand Scottish accent? Well, probably not. Yes, the Swedish spoken in Finland is an archaic version of Swedish. So they spoke like this in Sweden, like us in Sweden a number of hundred years ago. So we have an archaic form of Swedish, much like American dialects or accents are frequently older versions of what was spoken in what's today UK.
Interesting. Are there any unique words or things from Finland Svenska or the archipelago that is very different from Swedish?
Yeah, so I would say haru, for instance, one of the island types close to where our island is in the outer archipelago is called grå haru. And even the sheer fact that you pronounce it with short vowels, haru, they don't do that in Sweden. So I don't know how they would use such a word in Sweden at all. So yes, definitely, we have different words.
And what about foods? What's a very specific thing to the Finnish-Swedish archipelago?
Gravad lax would be one that everybody knows. I would
what
say
is gravad lax?
Gravad lax is cured salmon. Okay. And then we have what Swedes call skarpsill, what we call vassbuk. That is relative to salmon, but like 10 centimeters long, and it's super delicious, and there's various ways of making it, and it's a typical thing in the archipelago here of Nagu.
But also there is a place called Åland. You've mentioned it a couple times. Now Åland is very, very interesting because it is neither Finnish nor Swedish.
Correct.
So, but it was established when?
So of course,
before the United Nations, correct?
So the predecessor of the United Nations, the League of Nations, approved in 1921, sort of the only thing that they did of lasting importance was to rule that Åland was to be part of Finland, not of Sweden. And why did that question even pop up? Well, it was because when Russia occupied Finland in 1809, Åland was part of what was being occupied. And in 1921, there was lots of movement, or prior to 1921, many of the people on Åland wanted to be part of Sweden because they don't know any Finnish there, and they're culturally very much associated with Sweden. But League of Nations made, based on the plea of Finland, the decision that Åland should be part of Finland, but it is autonomous and it is monolingual Swedish, and they also have a special military situation. First of all, they were part of the Crimean War, not the current one, but the previous one, 1850, whenever it was. As a result of things happening then, it was sort of demilitarized. Åland was not, although it is of great strategic importance, much like Gotland in Sweden, it didn't have a military presence, and it also was confirmed as part of this League of Nations thing that Finland was not supposed to have any military presence in peace times on Åland. And that of course changed when the peace was no longer there. So during World War II, my father was on what was even called front lines then, on Hammarland in Åland, and so Åland is demilitarized, meaning there's no army there, there's no navy there are no soldiers there. And that is of course in these days not necessarily smart. If you look at the case of Russia, Russia has closed all its consulates in Finland in all of the other cities except for one place, and that's the capital of Åland, Mariehamn.
Thank you again for coming on the show and talking about Finland Svensk and their culture. I learned a lot, and I'm sure lots of other people did too.
I was super happy to get the opportunity to talk about these things. I could talk about them for ages.
And if someone wanted to find out more about Project Frederika, how would they do that?
They would do that either through our website, which is Project Frederika, frederika.fi, or through our Wikipedia project page, which also is called Project Frederika.
A poem that I read and you read at the beginning was by none other than a famous poet named J.L. Runeberg.
Yes.
And Frederika is, or
his
was?
Wife. But this is not the token wife. She was also Finland's first female journalist, and she was a writer in her own right, and that is why we decided for our project to pick a name which is not yet another man, but somebody who has created value for humanity despite her gender at a point in time where that was not the usual thing.
Thank you again for coming on the show at Tales Under the Cat Tree and talking about Project Frederika.
My pleasure.
Thank you for listening to episode 17 of Tales Under the Cat Tree. A huge thanks to Kaj Arnö for subjecting himself to such a long interview. I am sure you will hear from him again in some upcoming episodes of this podcast. We had to end the interview when we came to the Finnish Civil War, as we had to join the Summer Folk Festival at Nagu that night, which also was celebrating the 630th birthday of Nagu. In this episode, I mentioned the case of the disappearing internet, which is episode 12. Have a listen and see if you agree about how fast our online history is disappearing. I will be back next week with another episode of Tales Under the Cat Tree. If you believe that this podcast or the writing I feature deserves to be seen by others, please do share. It would mean a lot to me and to the many friends who help me, listen to me, and will come on the show in the future. Please support our efforts by subscribing. You can reach me through email, contact@dupes.ca, bluesky@dups.ca, or on my site and this post at tales.dupes.ca. The intro music is composed by me. Remember to subscribe so I can get to know you better and learn from you. Give your pet a cuddle and your loved ones a hug till we meet again for some Tales Under the Cat Tree.